All right, we are back for part 2 with Michelle Shapiro talking about not only like last week, we went through all like the specifics of like what is mast cell activation syndrome, what is POTS, what is hypermobility, how are they all related, how do they relate to COVID, the immune system, all the things. This week, we want to talk more about the actual treatment of them. So we're going to go through like what is conventional treatment for these different conditions, what is the more functional treatment, or what we think is correct, and then we will talk about some alternative treatments as well that we're like, hey, maybe just be careful with this, based on Michelle's amazing experience. So let's first talk about mast cell activation syndrome. Like, what is the typical conventional approach to that?
Yeah, so this is going to be mostly a medication approach when it comes to MCAS, and there are medications that are extremely valid. A lot of them are extremely valid. I will also tell you this, even in functional care, a lot of my clients need some level of antihistamine drug during the beginning to basically stabilize symptoms. So what people are going to do is they'll either have mast cell stabilizing drugs or antihistamine specific drugs. Doctors may also recommend other things that help your body to like break down histamines. They might recommend vitamin C or DAO, or which we can talk about in the functional model, obviously, but they might recommend those things. But oftentimes you're going to find with doctors who specialize in MCAS, they're going to be very targeting the mast cells themselves. Their stabilization drugs, cromolyn, sodium, ketotifen, those kind of drugs, and over-the-counter antihistamine drugs that might work on different histamine receptors in the brain or body, depending.
And I think like it's really important to keep in mind that it's okay to use conventional approaches while you're working on other things. I can't tell you how many people we've worked with are like, oh, and I had to take this medication because like I really just couldn't handle the symptoms. I'm like, please do not apologize for taking something that's going to help you. Healing is not linear. It's not straightforward. And when you're dealing with mast cell activation syndrome and typically other conditions like POTS, like hypermobility, like you have to do what you have to do. I mean, you can't make other changes in your life if you are constantly having flares. So don't feel bad about taking medication is like what I want people to understand.
100%. And I will say that I can't say this definitively, but I think it's very hard to stabilize mast cells without medications. And basically what happens is your body will release X amount of mediators from one event. Those will be floating around your bloodstream for 3 months. These drugs, the antihistamine drugs specifically, will block the symptoms. They're not blocking the actual histamines from being released. However, if you're blocking the symptoms and you are taking antihistamine drugs, it is proposed that then your body doesn't start this cyclical response of releasing more histamines. I have to tell you one of the, in my opinion, dumbest features of the human body, which is that the more histamines that are present, the more the body releases histamines. Yeah. So if we eat a high histamine food, it's not only that the high histamine food will have a problem, will cause a problem in symptoms. Then the body goes, ooh, histamines, let me release more. So anything you do to bring down histamines or other mediators or targeting the mast cells as a whole can potentially stop that cycle. So you really have to crack in and you might have to be a little bit forceful. So that is going to be, from a conventional standpoint, the first step is just make this process stop in whatever way possible. It's not only like there's no shame in these medications. I'd take it a step further. For most people at some point, they'll probably need them. And that's just the reality.
I think just like in the wellness space, it's like the medication is so demonized. And it's like, listen, sometimes it's necessary. And I mean, a lot of the times it is. It's not like a bad thing. I think true magic happens when we're using conventional and functional approaches. Like it's like common sense, but a lot of people are pretty extreme. So I would say we cannot be extreme in this scenario. So that's like the more conventional approach, some sort of medication, whether it's like prescription or over the counter. What is like the functional approach to dealing with this?
We're going to break this into 3 things, Amanda, because there's a functional approach and then there's the approach that I like. So the functional approach is actually not the approach that I like generally. Mm-hmm. I have my qualm with what the functional approach is we have to find the root cause of the MCAS. Why is your body having this response? Now, remember, MCAS can happen from an immune situation, a virus, taking too many antibiotics, gut damage. It can happen from environmental triggers. So many things can fill that bucket up, more than we could even name on this podcast. How many things
Yeah.
can fill that bucket up? That could be a whole episode on just the triggers for MCAS, essentially. So if basically we say that a parasite is the reason we have MCAS and it's wreaking havoc, causing a constant activation of the immune system, depleting us of nutrients, what a lot of functional medicine doctors will do is say the root cause of your histamines is parasites. We have to kill these parasites. And then that causes huge mast cell activation because your body's like, oh my God, I don't have the nutrients for this. I can't get rid of this thing. You've talked about detox and drainage so beautifully on this podcast, Amanda. So people will know by now that detox is this process of repackaging toxins, repackaging hormones, and then sending them out of the body in new forms, essentially, right? So if we don't have the nutrients and we don't have the detox capacity, what happens is we start recirculating those toxins. And guess who's going to get irritated by that? Our mast cells, because they see, oh my God, there's toxins. That mounts a new response. So any effort in functional medicine to treat the root cause is not going to be effective if you don't stabilize those histamines. So you have to stabilize histamines and other mast cell mediators, cytokines, heparin, elastases before, and there's thousands of mediators, by the way, before going into the root cause treatment. So that's my big qualm about functional medicine is you have to support the body's baseline stability and foundations first before you start doing those things. So that's really is the functional model is, all right, do we go on a low histamine diet? Maybe. And not only does our body release and create histamines, it also we can get them, ingest them from foods. So there's some foods that make our body release histamines and there's some foods that just are high in histamines, basically by themselves. It's from the amino acid histidine being converted. So I think that when approaching, a lot of functional medicine doctors will immediately, with people with MCAS, put them on a low histamine diet. And I will tell you, there are times and places where that diet is necessary from an elimination standpoint. But the foods that are high in histamines are so healthy, right? Yeah. It's like fermented foods, citrus fruits, bone broth. Like these are some of the healthiest foods ever. We don't want to eliminate these foods. Tomatoes, spinach, like you couldn't get healthier foods. So if we eliminate all of those foods in the long term, we're doing ourselves a huge disservice. So I think that's another issue I see with functional medicine doctors. They immediately throw people on a low histamine diet, and that's helpful in the short term and harmful in a very long term, basically.
And so the approach that we are saying is what we find the most helpful is, again, like stabilizing the mast cells in the first place, which I feel like it's like the foundations, right? Like, yes, nervous system support, figuring out what helps your body feel safe. Like, and people might not know what that means. It's like, what makes you feel good? You know, like what makes you just feel really good and happy, like try to incorporate those things more. Because sometimes people feel like guilty doing that, or they're just like, I don't really know what makes me feel safe. But it's like, it doesn't have to be that serious. What makes you happy? What makes you feel good? Even just like little things that make you feel like comfort. It's like trying to give your body those, especially when you feel like you're in a flare. Like I always think about, like, you always take baths. You're just like, I'm in the tub. I couldn't deal with life. I'm in the tub.
I know. I'm like calling you from the bathtub. However, by the way, because of this, there was a time where I couldn't take baths, and we'll talk about that in the pot section. But
yeah,
it was
which is tragic because that's tragic. Like a big one, right? So it's like, it doesn't have to be anything like crazy, but like what makes you feel comfort that is also not going to cause symptoms, like little things like that. I think it's so important. It's like, are you eating enough? What is going to set off this stress alarm in your body and create that cortisol, that stress response? Because remember, histamines are a stress response. So what's going to create that? Like, make sure you're eating enough, like all the basic things that I'm always talking about. Light exposure, circadian rhythm is huge for histamine issues because histamines are released based on a circadian pattern. Gut health cannot be fixed if we don't have a healthy circadian rhythm. Detox is not going to occur properly if we don't have a healthy biological clock supported by our circadian rhythm. So like I did a whole episode on that with Carrie Bennett. So like that's a foundational thing we always focus on. And sometimes that's the hardest one for these clients because their schedules and lives have gotten so disrupted from their symptoms. So it's like those things can sound simple and like maybe you're like, well, I've tried the circadian stuff. It didn't work. It's not a thing that you try and stop. Okay. Circadian's like for life. We need to
Forever.
have
Yeah.
healthy light exposure forever. And it's a part of those stepping stones. So it's like, there's no one perfect diet. Low histamine might help. If you feel better doing it, do it
Low
while you're
oxalate might
healing.
help too. It just,
Yeah.
it depends. Yeah.
It's just,
Exactly.
but it's like, it doesn't have to be that like complex. And before you try a low histamine, if you're not eating enough, I cannot tell you how many clients we've had. They're on a low histamine diet. They're like, I kind of can't really tell if it's working. I feel better some days I don't. And then we look and we're like, you are grossly under eating food. Like you have to
Exactly.
eat more food. So balancing your blood sugar swings can be like a trigger. So little things like that, don't discount those foundations, because that's how you set yourself up to eventually, to one, your body starts to feel safe because it's not constantly having these stress responses. And then that's how you set yourself up to actually be able to start to address these things and get a little deeper.
100% agree. And I think if you're stressing yourself out about the food, we're not saying it to be like philosophical. Like quite literally, if you're more stressed about the food than the actual food impacting you, that stress itself is going to be very harmful. I will tell you this, when it comes to the low histamine diet, people are kind of hang their hats thinking this is going to fix MCAS, but then you walk into a room with bleach in it and your histamines, are all over the place, and your other mast cell mediators are all over the place. So you can't really know if it's the diet that's helping. But man, do you know when you have tomato sauce and then you're sick for 24 hours after, you're like, oh my God, do I have food poisoning? I always say it's so funny. All my clients after they fly, the day 24 hours after they fly, they're like, Michelle, do I have food poisoning right now? And I'm like, no, you just were on an airplane, because there's like a little bit of a delayed response post-flight, but airplanes have every mast cell trigger you could ever imagine. There's vibration, there's weird smells, there's people near you, sensory things, atmospheric changes, like everything. It's
Some
like a
people are
pot
afraid of flying. That doesn't help.
anxiety. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like which like, shouldn't we be? We're like flying in a tube in the air. It's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, of course. Yeah, exactly. Even though I'm weirdly not, but my body still, there's so many things going on. So I think if you do a very short term low histamine diet and you're like, I'm not sure if it's helping or not, it could not be. But if you're full of symptoms, I'm sure you're like myself or Amanda, when you're sick, you'll try anything.
Yeah.
Try it only for a short term. I have to be honest, you aren't really going to know if it's working or not though, because there's so many other things. Also, these flares, when it comes to MCAS, when it comes to POTS, they're going to come in like a week. Sometimes they'll come for 4 days. And then you have to just treat the flare instead of seeking and thinking, oh, was it this thing that got me? Was it this thing that got me? Just spring into action and say, how can I help myself right now? And you're going to make for yourself, when it comes to MCAS, when it comes to POTS, when it comes to hypermobility, a flare pack. So it's like, yeah, I run to those Epsom salt baths now because I can tolerate them again. Woohoo. I know what to do. I have like a heated pack that has lavender in it. I'm putting it right on, if I have coat hanger pain, it's going right on my shoulders. I'm using arnica cream if I have, muscles that are in pain. Instead of prompting into, oh my God, what happened? What did I do? What did I do? Why did I eat that? What happened? That's where you're going to go, how can I help you, body? And this is what you need to develop with these conditions, is your own system for helping yourself. Where is the symptoms coming from? Is it a POTS-like symptom? Is it an MCAS symptom? Where is this coming from? And then you can help and support yourself based on what works for you, because it's going to be different for every person.
So let's talk about some of the things that remove histamines from the body. Like what the difference from that and like blocking histamines overall. Like what are some of these things that you may possibly utilize in practice with clients?
Yeah. So when it comes to like helping the body to break down histamines to get them out, because then also like drainage is really important. So just any good drainage practice. I know you've had lymphatic people on the podcast. That's where you're looking at that. But when it comes to like the detoxification of histamines, vitamin C and Dow are two top, except vitamin C is very high in histamine. So you have to go very, very slow when you're starting it.
Yeah.
B vitamins are going to be essential in helping to bring histamines out of the body. Anything that supports liver detox, which is the primary site of histamine detoxification, is going to help. And then specifically Dow, this enzyme diamine oxidase, which you can take with food, will help to break down histamine like as it enters digestion, and really in liver detox. It's very important in both stage 1 and stage 2 liver detoxification for histamines. So that's another thing we can do. And then properly hydrating, doing things like that. The problem is there's things you do to prevent it, right? Like Like nettle leaf tea, I find to be really
Yeah.
helpful for people. Ginger for some of the inflammation that comes from mast cells. Ginger teas feel really, really supportive. And we have like so many different strategies in the Highly Sensitive Body Hub for this, because there's going to be strategies that are going to work on a nervous system level. Once those mediators are gone, there's going to be strategies that work to help reduce histamines from being released in the first place, like nettle leaf tea. It'll help with that and will help with the breakdown of it. And then there's actual nutrients, minerals that will help to usher the histamines out of the body in the right way.
Magnesium is really cool for
Magnesium.
histamines.
Oh, yeah.
It can help stabilize mast cells. I like reishi. Do you ever use reishi with people?
No, but tell me how you've felt about it. Because I have had clients who've come to me already using reishi, but I don't know if it's like sometimes like too fungal for people, that it's like creating a little bit more of a response. So I'm curious to hear your experience. Yeah.
I like to use it in pregnancy because it's safe. Like there's a lot of things you can't utilize in pregnancy for mast cell stuff. So, and just like any supplement in general. But it's safe for pregnancy. Traditional Chinese medicine uses it a lot because it's like, they call them reishi babies. If you have it throughout pregnancy, then you'll have like a calm, chill baby. And
so cute.
I don't know. Eliana was calm when I took it my whole first pregnancy because I was a histamine, and I was like, maybe it's great for your immune system, supportive, but it can stabilize mast cells. That's what it's shown in the research. But I also think it's just nice for people's nervous system. So I think that it's like kind of like a nice
double
balance.
win.
Yeah, It's definitely not enough on its own, but it's one that I have had. It's mostly I'll use it with pregnant women.
In the Highly Sensitive Body Hub, one thing that we do is we kind of separate supplements and herbal approaches into like a strategy and a system. So I wouldn't first do like things that push detox, because then you're going to have that problem with histamines. I would first find any supplement, food, lifestyle habit that supports the nervous system. That's step one. So that could be something like a neurocalm, GABA, L-theanine, things like that are really calming and cooling. Then you focus on things to help you break down histamines. Mm-hmm. Then you can focus on the gut lining. Then you can focus on the liver and pushing detox. Then you can focus on rebuilding those nutrient stores. Minerals, which is like, hello, we're in mineral land. We're on Miss Amanda Montalvo's podcast, Mrs. Those are going to come through in basically every single stage. Those are going to be important for nervous system. Those are going to be important for immune system, reducing histamines, everything, because we know our liver is desperate for nutrients and minerals during that liver detox anyway. So minerals are like broad spectrum. You can't lose when it comes to supplementing, obviously in the right way, which is the way that you teach people. You can't just, throw a bunch of minerals at yourself. Obviously you got to do it strategically.
And it's like, you will likely have very depleted minerals if you are struggling with any of these conditions, because your body has used up the resources to respond to the stress that it's undergoing. So I love that. And I think that's an important way to think about it, of like, okay, how are we layering this in? So we're going to do like some nervous system support, then we can move on to the other areas. So it's the same thing with like the lifestyle changes that you're making in your day to day. It'll all like match up. And this is why a lot of the like parasite cleanses and stuff, like I can't tell you how many people do those. And they're like, do you recommend doing parasite cleanses like a couple times a year for everyone? I'm like, no, God, no. So many people do. So many people do, Michelle. It's terrifying. They're like,
a couple times a year? Are you freaking kidding?
A year doing a parasite cleanse.
From that one company? Good marketing, that one company.
Yeah, I'm like, and honestly, just in general, I feel like a lot of my clients are like, oh, I saw this on TikTok, and they'll like show me like crazy parasite stuff. And I'm like, you have to keep everything in context to yourself, especially if you're in a highly sensitive body, because I promise you, it's not meant for you. And it's like, you have to think about like, how's my immune system functioning? Is my immune system ready? How are my detox pathways? Are those ready? Like how, is my digestion like even good in the first place? Probably not going to be too concerned with a parasite cleanse if those things aren't in a good place first. So I'm sure people will say like, oh, like someone said like this healed like their mast cell activation syndrome. Just remember, like you might be more sensitive to them, and did they really have it? Who knows? But I just see a lot of crazy things that my clients show me, and I'm like, this is probably not real. And it's definitely like, you can't even take vitamin C. So no, we're not going to do like this whole
any of this.
Yeah.
This is, if you're in a highly sensitive body, and the way I would describe this like term that we're using, this highly sensitive body, because this is not like a real term. This is how I just describe and cluster things in my head. It is not, it's real for us, but it's not like HSP, which is a real term, by Elaine Aron. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
But the way I describe the person who lives in a highly sensitive body is that they are interacting and attuned to their environment. And it could be from like a spiritual sense, even a physical sense, in a way that is stronger or different than how other people are interacting. So I can promise you, if you're in a highly sensitive body, there's almost no information on Instagram that's catered to you. And I know that was the case for me, because the more I did online, the less I was feeling good. You really have to go to practitioners like you, Amanda, who are very aware of the highly sensitive body, are very specific in catering your content to make sure you would never say, oh, everyone do this for your thyroid. Everyone do this. Yeah. Because now a lot of people are in those highly sensitive bodies. I also have a quiz to determine if you are potentially in a highly sensitive body, and I'll give you the link.
Okay, yeah, we'll put that in there. That's a good one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so we've gone through MCAS. Let's talk about POTS. What is the conventional treatment for it? Then we'll get into the functional, and then like what is the most ideal.
I don't know if we want to leave this in, but I'm having so much fun. This is just so enjoyable to talk about anyway.
It is really fun. It's I can't wait to share this with a lot of my clients that are struggling in these areas, because it's like they don't get a lot of content for them, No,
I know. This is like, I'm always in it for the people who would be considered the freaks, the anomalies. I'm the freak and the anomaly. So I love talking to you guys who's listening. Like, those are my people. It's always been our people, Amanda. Like, that's who we are, I've given a joke before that I have friends who can just go to the beach and be in the sun for like 10 hours and then just drink beers and stuff. And I'm like, I don't understand anything that's going on in your body, but I understand the person who needs to like slather themselves with zinc oxide because they can't even use the regular sunscreen and like be outside for 35 minutes and hydrate 4 electrolyte packets. I'm like, there's my girl. That's the person I understand, So the conventional treatment for POTS is really focused around stabilizing the symptoms of POTS in ways of the heart rate, in ways of the dizziness, in ways of anything that's going to create that vasoconstriction properly. So you're going to go to a doctor. They're going to tell you have 10 grams of sodium per day. They're going to tell you wear those compression socks, maybe even wear an abdominal binder. And then they're also going to potentially, doctors may give prescriptions for things that stabilize the heart rate, like propranolol, metoprolol, like beta blocker drugs, essentially, to stabilize the heart rate. These also, much like with the MCAS medications, are very oftentimes necessary for people in the beginning. You also might, which I like to see with the POTS doctor, they may recommend something called the Levine protocol, which is a specific exercise protocol that it takes into account that people feel worse when they make positional changes. And it's really about reconditioning so that you can recondition those blood vessels also, which is so, so important in POTS. Yeah, it's called the CHOP-Levine protocol, CHOPLEVINE. So they might recommend that, which I would think is really awesome if they did. And what you'll notice about all of these interventions is they're really treating the symptoms. And I have to tell you, the POTS symptoms are so severe and so uncomfortable. MCAS too. There's something particularly cruel about POTS where it's someone who's just like literally trying to sleep. There's one form of POTS called hyperadrenergic POTS, which is basically like you have adrenaline dumping. So you just are trying to sleep and your eyes are wide open from the histamines and the POTS symptoms. And you're so dizzy that when you actually stand up, your heart rate goes crazy and you literally can't see straight. And then you're in a lot of body pain. Like this is like no joke from a symptom perspective. For me, again, in the previous episode, I asked people to like be hopeful and be ridiculously, recklessly hopeful. POTS will get you down for sure. Yeah. Like POTS is so, so hard. Like it feels very life threatening. I don't know what else to call it. It feels like you're going to die. I don't know. That's how I experience it. Everyone's is different, but you are going to have to do things. And then I guess from the functional or our treatment is you really have to do things that stabilize symptoms first anyway, because you have to be able to get out of bed. There's many people with hypermobility and POTS who are immobile. And if they can't get out of bed, then I want you to know that I'm speaking to you as like in a totally different context. But for people who are still mobile and able to, it's really about like making those routines, looking at the sun at a certain time, not leaving bed without having that fluid, because overnight you're getting more dehydrated, you haven't moved. So people really have horrible POTS symptoms in the morning And if they have that hyperadrenergic POTS, you get these episodes of something called adrenaline dumping. And
We've
it's like,
had
that's where
clients with them.
it
It's
is just
terrible.
It's my least favorite thing that I've ever experienced. I'm very grateful it happened, because then I wouldn't be able to talk to people about it, because I could never have understood how it was until you experience it, because you have so much adrenaline in your body that you do think that something absolutely horrible is going on. At the same time, you're shaking, you're sweating, you're running to the bathroom, but you can't run to the bathroom because you're so dizzy. I mean, we are talking about like real symptoms, like real people with real experiences. And I think for that, again, you have to do anything to treat the nervous system, because POTS is a dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. That's the class of conditions that this is under. It's a nervous system disorder. And then you also have to stabilize your heart rate in whatever way you can. So it might be, don't even get out of bed without putting your legs up on the wall, getting some juicy blood flow to your heart, making sure you put your compression socks on before you leave bed. You have to probably use the conventional treatments, especially in the beginning, and then you can focus on the reconditioning, rehydration, remineralization.
Question on compression socks, because I know people are going to ask. Do you have a brand that you like?
So the compression sock brand that I think is cute, and I like the level of compression, is Vim and Vigor, VIM and VIGR.
Okay. I'll link them.
Here's the fun part of these conditions, Amanda, is that some people will have, and I'm going to actually speak on something. There's a fourth layer to these conditions. So there's hypermobility, MCAS, and POTS. There's another one that kind of comes in with this genetic theory called the RCCX gene theory, which is neurodivergence. So ADHD and ASD spectrum disorders, right? And oftentimes people who may have POTS may also be neurodivergent and experience the symptoms of that. So the compression socks can actually be like a sensory issue. I'm laughing because like, why does this have to be so complicated?
I know.
It can be a sensory, I'm not laughing because of the experience. Like, trust me, there's nothing funny about the experience. But also if you have histamine issues, you can get overheated. So it's really important to choose like a more easy breezy compression sock to start with. And then I wouldn't wear them overnight. I'm not giving any real recommendations on that, because everyone has to find what works for them. But usually it's when you first wake up in the morning is when people need to kind of like get in their POTS game for the day, because that's where you'll have to really hydrate really well, get your compression socks on, maybe do a couple exercises in bed, maybe do some deep breathing, something like that is going to be really important.
And we breezed right over the 10 grams of sodium, but it's a lot of sodium. People, and we're not saying, yes, we said it correctly, 10 grams. So that is like 4 times the RDA, right, of that 2,300 milligrams. I know that can sound like, how is that possible? It is possible. The research shows there's not like an amazing amount of research around it, but it basically shows that with that much sodium, it was able to reduce the majority of the POTS symptoms. And a lot of it is that like constriction that's happening. So it's important. It increases that blood volume. So it's really important. An important piece of it that I think people are a little afraid of, because we're like, salt is always demonized, but we cannot be afraid of sodium. You need more sodium when you have POTS. It will help the symptoms. And I don't say that a lot, but it will. I don't recommend jumping right to 10 grams. I recommend doing it slower, because otherwise you'll probably have some fluid retention, which not going to make you feel great. And I find that a lot of people that have mast cell activation syndrome are already struggling with fluid retention. So they're like, please don't make that worse. So you can do it slowly. You can start by having a little, again, like I like the mornings for people, because you're kind of setting yourself up for success for the day, is like put a pinch of sea salt. I like to have people do it right under their tongue, drink some water with it, like 12, 16 ounces, whatever works for you. Again, like you're rehydrating. If you can do this first thing in the morning, that's incredibly helpful. It's also great for your adrenals. So like most people notice like, wow, I feel really good after I do this. That's a great way to start. You'll probably find that if you just add some salt to your water throughout the day, that can be helpful. A lot of our clients with POTS like to do the pinch of salt throughout the day. You can also use it in the moment for symptoms if you're having a flare. So don't be afraid of salt. I don't think we need to start counting exactly how much we're taking in every single day, but
add more.
Yeah, just slowly start increasing it. You can what will help is if you also increase your potassium-rich food sources. So focusing, so many foods have potassium. So from like beef and salmon have a ton of potassium and like dairy for people that are kind of more focused on the protein-rich foods. We do also get a lot of potassium from carbs. So I'm always like, try to get most of your carbs from whole foods and you'll probably increase your potassium significantly. Potatoes, squash, pretty much all fruit. Again, like if we're on that low histamine diet, that can make it very challenging to get a lot of potassium in. And then you up your sodium and then you wonder why you have fluid retention. So be mindful of it. Aloe vera juice, like I get people like hit or miss with coconut water. Like I like to have people do adrenal cocktails with coconut water and just salt. That's plenty. It's sodium, potassium. I get a lot of people that can't tolerate that because they're super sensitive. And so I'll have them do aloe vera juice, the interleaf version. That's a ton of potassium. It's also great for your gut, which most of these people need. So that could be like, if you're having a hard time increasing potassium-rich foods because you're struggling with like the histamine piece, then you could definitely just focus on like meat, dairy, aloe vera juice. If you can tolerate coconut water, cool. But increasing them at the same time, again, doesn't have to be a perfect ratio. That will help avoid fluid retention. If you start to retain fluid, you could just not continue to increase that sodium, go back down, up your potassium-rich foods, and it should resolve it. But we do, in fact, need around 10 grams of sodium. Some doctors even in studies even show 15 grams has been helpful for people. I think it's best to experiment and find what's best for you. But that is another really important part of that, like conventional. I would even say that's like kind of functional because not all doctors will recommend that, unfortunately.
No. And also, like you said, everyone's going to have a different tolerance for it too. Yeah. And there's actually some people who have POTS that actually have like intracranial hypertension. This is the weird thing about it. So you have to be careful and you have to go with your body. And like you're saying, Amanda, go slow, go with your body. Like any other thing you're going to hear on a podcast, listen to your body first and everything like that. I'll also say the weird thing is that when people increase sodium, they would expect their heart rate to increase because you're getting more vasoconstriction. When in reality, people's heart rates start to stabilize because remember, the high heart rate comes from first a low blood pressure, low heart rate, and then your body going, holy crap, I need blood. Yeah. So if your body has the kind of vasoconstriction, you have good, juicy blood flow from the fluids that you have and the sodium acting as a vasoconstrictor or inducing vasoconstriction, your heart rate actually becomes more stabilized, which is really cool.
And that's really like the benefit in all the studies is that it's like they've gone from like this, like, whether it's like erratic, high heart rate, most of it is like inconsistent because they're monitoring people having flares. So it's extremely helpful. And I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. And those are like two things that people could literally go and do today. Get those compression socks if you want to experiment with them, increase your salt intake. What are some of the more functional perspectives on POTS?
Yeah, I think that if there's something, again, it's all about maybe two pieces of this, which is that how do we kind of build that connective tissue so that we have that strong blood vessel? How do we like work on the epithelial cells? And then how are we focusing on treating the nervous system? I would say that's like the approach for POTS because you want the blood vessels to be functioning properly. You want the heart to be functioning properly, but those are only happening as a result of really good blood vessels and only happening as a result of really good nervous system approach. So honestly, it's like more simple than even that, but you stabilize the symptoms in POTS and ways of stabilizing blood flow, stabilizing muscle tension, and then you're focused on the whole way through nervous system. And then really importantly, you have to recondition. So this is just so essential. This will come up when we talk about hypermobility too, but when it comes to POTS, you absolutely cannot not have muscle. You have to have muscle and you have to condition that muscle. It is so important for blood flow. And also our muscle is an endocrine organ. So we start sending out those mediators, cytokines, myokines to the rest of the body too. And there's immune system involvement in it. So it's just really, really important. That's what I'm looking at, honestly, functionally. And then I might be doing some nutrients. I might be focused on Again, in hypermobility too, how are we building collagen? How are we building connective tissue? I might be focused on those things. And then in POTS, I'm still focused on MCAS. I'm still making sure that we're not having that huge histamine release, but that's like the more robust picture of what we would be looking at for POTS.
I just had like a weird epiphany about,
Please.
This is probably more of a conversation just with you, Michelle, but everyone else can listen in too, because I've been with this community for a while. But I just had this thought of like, okay, if we're building up connective tissue, vitamin C is obviously important. Copper is really important for connective tissue. But when it comes to histamine issues and mast cell activation syndrome, copper can send people into a little tailspin because of how it affects our iron status. So I'm just like, man, that's got to be tricky.
And iron too.
And iron, too. High iron and low. I go through this in the histamine, or I call it the histamine hub, the highly sensitive body hub. I go through iron in those lessons because like having too much iron is a problem. It'll cause more histamines. Having too little iron is a problem. And with COVID too, like long COVID, like lactoferrin has had a lot of success with improving symptoms for people. And that helps us increase iron absorption in our intestinal cells. So very interesting stuff. But I was like, oh my gosh, well, if I was working on a collagen for someone, I would definitely look at copper. But so many people can't tolerate beef liver that have like mast cell activation syndrome issues.
Have you found that? Have you found people get flared? I think if you go slow, if you go
slow, it's fine. But it's unfortunately people like will look at stuff online and they're like, oh, I take they'll eat beef liver, like a huge portion of it. Or sometimes like they don't do well with the raw liver. They do better with cooked. And so it's, it's easy to overdo it or if they take like the 6 capsules of beef liver supplements every single day. Soon. Like it ends up being too much. And I'm like, yes, you need those nutrients. It's just like probably in a smaller amount. There's a lot of copper in beef liver, which could be really helpful for someone working on their collagen formation. But just a weird aside that I was like, oh my gosh, must be kind of tricky for people that have histamine.
It sure is. And then there's the whole, now zinc, by the way, is something that, oh God, you're the perfect person to talk to about this.
Yeah.
Zinc is something that a lot of conventional medicine doctors even will recommend for hypermobility. So let me ask you about that. We have a potential copper deficiency in these people and they're slamming themselves with zinc. What's your concern there?
It's a nightmare. That's like the biggest softball. And of how mostly too, because how that zinc is going to impact iron. Like, I cannot tell you how many people come to us with low iron that are supplementing with zinc for years. And I'm like, you have to stop taking zinc. Like, we've got to just focus on food sources or at least like lower the dose. I talked about this in the hub videos too, of like, you can take a lower dose zinc supplement and then get more zinc from food. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but a lot of people take zinc. They don't know their copper status. If I had hypermobility, I personally would not take zinc because it wouldn't make any sense.
That's what I've told colleagues before, and I've told people. I don't really recommend zinc supplementation without your consent anyway, Amanda. To be honest with you, it'll be like
iron client. Every iron client, she sends me their labs, and I like love it. I'm like, why is this so interesting? And post COVID is even more interesting because of like how iron is reacting, like how the body's reacting. It's like it goes up initially and then it sequesters it goes down, but it's like, well, do you actually have enough iron though? Should we be taking iron supplements? Are you going to make your body more inflamed? It's very nuanced, but just had that weird thought about copper and collagen. So we can keep
but going. That's really important because that would have come up in the hypermobility piece where I do think people handle beef liver supplements when going very slow better because it's whole food sources at least. I've noticed that even
for sure versus like a MCAS synthetic B vitamin or something. Oh yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, exactly. And I do notice that there's a couple reasons why beef liver would be supportive across the board in these populations. All three, honestly.
Yeah. It's just you got to go slow. I'll often encourage like beef kidney that has DAO enzyme in it. Perfect. That can be really helpful. Like if you want to do a combination of them, there's even some supplements that have both in them, but it's definitely something that you want to go slow with. Okay. So we've covered the functional, conventional, everything, our view of mast cell activation syndrome. You covered POTS. Let's end it with hypermobility. what
bring it
is
home.
what is the conventional kind of take? How do we conventionally treat hypermobility?
I started laughing when you asked that because I'm like, is there one? I don't know if
There
anyone even
isn't
cares about
one because we've had so many clients that are like, yeah, I saw a hypermobility doctor and I got the diagnosis and then that's it.
Exactly. And also, we don't even know what to look out for with it. So, this is something where I normally don't tell people to do this. You have to go to someone who specializes in it.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate PTs and chiropractors who specialize in this, because the name of the game with hypermobility is reconditioning and not overusing and or putting yourself into a situation where you're going to get into a flare or anything like that. So exercise is so important in hypermobility. And then again, anything that helps you build muscle, anything that helps build up connective tissue is going to be so important. But you really have to not push your body past a point that it feels safe. And then also there's a lot about muscle stabilization. Like a lot of people with hypermobility have upper cervical instability. So when I found out I even had hypermobility was because I went to a chiropractor who was not trained in hypermobility, because I was getting really dizzy when I started driving. And when I started, because I hadn't been driving for a long time, living in Manhattan, like you don't have a car in Manhattan. And then I started driving again and I started getting really dizzy. So I went to a chiropractor who did this whole adjustment on my neck. Please, I can't even think about it.
I don't even want to think about it. This was so
oh my
traumatic.
God. It was so traumatic, even for you, like my best friends, like my family, everyone was like freaking out. And I left there. He was digging into my neck and he was like, I've never felt anything so tight before. I left there and I couldn't see. I went straight to the ER basically because my heart rate was 180 sitting. I could not get my heart rate down. And basically what I want people to understand is there's huge nerves and brain structures in your neck, because it's like it pokes down at the back of your neck. And those nerves control, like your vagus nerve, we've heard about a million times, controls your heart rate. It controls which muscles should be used. So if you anything that happens to your neck is going to happen to the rest of your body. So this is the most important thing I can say when it comes to hypermobility. Do not let a masseuse touch your neck if you suspect that you have hypermobility. Don't let a chiropractor who doesn't specialize in hypermobility touch your neck. Don't do anything like that unless you know and have ruled out hypermobility. The assessment for hypermobility takes 5 minutes, by the way.
Yeah.
Every single chiro and PT should be doing an assessment for hypermobility because it should
I don't know how they don't. I would be.
I don't think
feel
they
like,
even think about it.
Isn't it a liability? I don't know. I just feel like it's a huge liability to not check because 50% of the population has hypermobility. Again, I think this information is just getting out there now. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully there's chiropractors listening. They're like, oh my gosh, like I know I have a lot of chiros in my audience. So we're not against chiropractic care, obviously.
But we love them. I'm talking about a chiropractor all these episodes.
I know
exactly.
And you went to a chiropractor because you're like, okay, I know this typically makes me feel better. So you go obviously didn't go great. But you were talking about how the assessment only takes like 5 minutes.
5-minute assessment.
Yeah.
Yep. That's it. And they're just literally like checking, move your joint this way, move your muscle this way, show me. And like, it's very clear. And then really people who are hypermobile are not eligible for any upper cervical adjustments, massages, anything. No one touches your neck. I don't even want people touching my neck if I'm not hypermobile, by the way. I'm pretty like, it's really scary because there's brain structures there. I have had clients who've had strokes from getting adjustments from something that happened with their brainstem in the back of their head. It's like, just be very careful with your neck, especially. And what had happened to me was all the like joints in my neck were loosened and I couldn't hold my head up. So I was in a neck brace seeing clients for months.
Oh my gosh.
And it was,
I will never forget that.
When we were Zooming, me, you, and Jillian, like literally just,
you had to lay in certain positions.
Exactly.
Like or like even after all the mold stuff, I remember like you'd be like, I'm just gonna lay down on the ground. I'm like, okay, this isn't normal, Michelle. Like having to lay down on the ground
for me because you know me for so long. It was like it was so not myself. But that was really set the POTS off for me. Upper cervical instability, like the joints in your neck being loose, is actually a huge risk factor for POTS. So, and you don't always feel it as pain. You don't always know, but I couldn't hold my head up on its own. Like I literally had to wear a neck brace to hold my head up for a very long time, longer than I would have wanted. And then I had to do like neck stabilization things after. And really, again, the goal in hypermobility is you got to have those muscles holding you up because you're not going to have the joints to do it, because the joints are not going to be created in the same way if you have a genetic connective tissue disorder. So the muscle is really going to be your stabilizer. That's what's going to hold you up. And then it's just really important for all of these conditions to not overuse use muscles, to not over exercise and under eat, it's going to set the whole thing off. So you can have a hypermobility thing that sets your MCAS off. You can have an MCAS thing because MCAS lives in your connective tissue too. So they're all connected. They're all right there. And your nervous system and your connective tissue communicate constantly also.
Yeah. So it's like finding someone that has experience. Like I'm going to link to the hypermobility chiropractor that we're always talking about. I'll link to her. I'm like, sometimes I'm scared too because I'm like, I don't want you to get so busy that like you can't help my clients.
It's fine. I've been connecting Taylor on other podcasts. I have to accept that but you know what? Taylor also has an entire practitioner program for other chiros, if they're listening, to train them on hypermobility. And cool. It's fantastic. So everyone will all be able to do these assessments. It'll be amazing.
We need so many more people that are educated on this. It's a really big thing. So I'll link to her resources, but it's like, again, like I feel like if you have hypermobility and you go to a doctor and then you can feel very discouraged. It's like, they're basically like, there's not that much
genetic,
you can do.
Nothing you can do.
It's genetic. But it's like, there's a lot that you can do. It's just, it's learning and understanding what the condition is, what impacts it. So I really hope that everyone listening has learned a lot from this episode. We tried to go through, what's the conventional approach, what's functional and sound, what's like probably not going to help you. And then, what Michelle has the most experience with helping her clients. So, is there anything else you want to add?
I think just from a very high level perspective that there is no symptom too big that you can that you can't get out of. There's no too late for any of you. There's no too anything. I'm talking to you from Amanda. We've been sitting talking for over 3 hours. We would, by the way, like literally 3 hours. There was a time when me and you would be Zooming and I literally had to turn my camera off and lay back completely. I can now sit up for 3 hours. I can drive. I can do anything. And you have to just hold that vision of that end game for yourself so much. The other thing is, from a limbic system, nervous system perspective, there are amazing programs that are like treatments for POTS and MCAS and MECFS and hypermobility like support, which are literally just brain programs. There's one called the Gupta program, which is incredible. Mm-hmm. Primal Trust, people love, DNS, and all of them, literally you're treating the body through the brain. So all of these are like a very top-down approach. And just know that being silly about believing and it feeling corny and it feeling like it's no reason, that is the first thing you're going to do for any of these conditions. And it's enough. Like it will kick you off and it will get you started. That was the biggest change for me that took me from being so sick. And then I also have to say just information, because Amanda, there was nothing. There was no information for me. I couldn't find it outside of Taylor, who we've talked about now 100 times. I couldn't get information from anywhere besides Reddit. So that's why we really made the Highly Sensitive Body Hub. And I brought in Amanda. I brought in these amazing practitioners to like give us your best stuff that no one else is getting anywhere, because we need it all in one place, because these conditions travel together often. One thing I want to specify with that too, that I get a lot of questions about, you don't have to have all three to have one. It's absolute. It just happens to happen a lot, but you can totally just be hypermobile, asymptomatic hypermobile. You can just have MCAS. You don't have to have hypermobility to have MCAS or something like that. You can have one or the other. They just happen to all interface in a specific way.
But we do kind of think POTS is a result of
POTS
mast
is the only one. POTS is the only one. And I think POTS and hypermobility are friends too. I think that you have to have a long-term MCAS in order to have POTS. I just don't see it being an independent condition, which is very rare because no POTS doctors, none, talk about MCAS at the same time. I've never seen it happen.
Mind-blowing to me, because I'm like, there's no way you don't recognize that a lot of their symptoms are also related to MCAS. So I hope this is helpful, encouraging. If you're wanting more resources, that's what Michelle made the Highly Sensitive Body Hub for. It is amazing. There's nothing else like it out there. And it's more just that if you're looking for information to help you actually make changes, like she talked about, like there's like the whole system for creating like what's going to be, I always think of it as like a go bag, like what's going to be like your go bag for your symptoms that you're going to have with you to help you, rather than spiraling and researching on the internet for hours or scrolling on Instagram trying to find information and like trying the next thing. Like it's just, that is so stressful. And I have so many clients that struggle with that. They're like, I just can't like research anymore. I've been on this research hole. I never finish anything because I'm always on to the next. You don't have to do that. The hub has made it so that all the resources are in one place. So you're not only going to get like mast cell activation, histamine issues, pot stuff, but Taylor's in there as well with the hypermobility stuff. So
of course,
it's truly amazing. I have already recommended it to a lot of our clients that struggle with it because, again, it's like they have us, but it's also nice to hear from other people. Like you learn differently from everyone. And there is just a great list of practitioners in there. Post-COVID people, please.
Yep.
Like
Whole course on long COVID within it. We have, this is my favorite thing about it. If I don't mind saying, my favorite thing about this damn thing is that we all just hustle to build, because I was like, this is eating me alive that I have this and I'm sitting on it. I need to give this to people and hand it. Like I need to put it out of me. It's in me and I need to put it out of me. I found that I couldn't find answers based on the symptoms I was experiencing. So there's actually a whole section where you can search based on symptoms. So we have the most predictable symptoms like dizziness, pain, brain fog, digestive issues, and you can look acid reflux. You can look for help based on that, or you can look based on, I want to learn some herbal support. Olivia Matrano, Organic Olivia, has an entire herbal course within this. Yeah. So there's like mini courses in addition to types of support you could need, because I know what the experience is like and being in that symptomatic state. Like I wanted to think, Michelle, you're in that mode where, how do you get the information you need? And I wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to do that.
Yeah. So it really is a great resource. As of this recording, I mean, it's probably going to shift eventually, but it's very inexpensive, guys. So if you need a good resource, get it now. Cause I'm sure things are going to shift as it evolves in the future. And I think that's it. I just want to encourage everyone because I know people are going to want more information. That's where it is. We do have it somewhere for you. When we did the reflux episode, we're like, oh my gosh, people want more information on histamines. We don't have like somewhere to send them. And so when Michelle was like telling me about this project, I was like, oh, thank God. Thank God. Because I need somewhere to refer people to. Because like you said, it's really easy to be on the internet researching your symptoms and not finding any answers. So I hope this podcast and the last one helped give you some of those answers. And if you need more help beyond this point, I highly recommend the program. If you prefer more one-on-one work, Michelle does work one-on-one with clients as well as her 5 practitioners as well. And I think that's it. But thanks so much for coming on again. It was nice to see your face and chat for a million hours before we recorded. And now my baby's finally peacefully asleep because we're all done.
Well, of course, because we're recording for 3 hours. So obviously the baby falls asleep now. I mean, obviously that's how it works. Yeah.
But
love you.
I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast. I'll see what kind of questions everyone has after hearing this, and we'll definitely have you back on. But that's it until the next episode. So thanks everyone for listening, and I'll see you next week.